Hi, this is Tracy Lewis from Stuff and Things. I'm doing my Creative Cat Crew Color Challenge today. The colors are Crumb Cake, Pool Party, Daffodil Delight, and Old Olive. And note, there is no Whisper White and no black, so I'm going to use no black and no white. I have decided to do a floral theme today, and I've chosen Botanical Builder, which is actually in the clearance section right now on the online store, but it is still available. The stamps that they had last year are no longer available. And for the sentiment, I picked out from the Butterfly Basics, Sending Wishes Your Way. As a base for my project, I am going to use a background stamp that is very close to the Stampin' Up! Hardwood background stamp, and I'm going to ink it up with Crumb Cake and stamp it onto Crumb Cake cardstock. For the sentiment layer, I'm going to cut, using Crumb Cake cardstock again, a stitched oval. Now I will sponge them both with Crumb Cake. One trick that you can use to save on cardstock is to cut out small pieces in the center and use the exterior edges as your matting, and that's what I did here. You can see the soft sky already has flowers cut out in the middle of it, and I did that in. At this point, I am now going to start coloring my flowers, and I'm doing color on color, so it's basically the same color on top of the same colored cardstock. And what I discovered is that with the sponging on the small flowers, I didn't get any intensity around the edges of the flowers, and so I grabbed a pencil eraser and used that to just get a really heavy, thick, small line of that dark color so that the edges were very defined. And then I also used it in the centers because later I'll put pearls on, and I'm hoping that some of the edge of the circle of color will show around the edge of the pearl. Now I need to get the sentiment stamped so I can do my arranging. And I want to point out that in all these years I've used the Misty, and I've always wondered why Stampin' Up! Hadn't come up with an equivalent, and they are now coming out with a tool that they have called Stamparatus that actually looks very cool, and I can't wait to see it next year. On the flower forming, I like to lay out the design to make sure I have enough of the floral elements ready to be formed. See, I even left a few extra flowers in there. They probably won't need. I then brought out my forming kit, which is a Susan's Garden toolkit that I used when I took some flower forming classes 3 years ago now, I guess. And I used the tools provided to break down the elements and fibers in the paper, and then I can shape the paper where I want it to, and it kind of gives the paper a little bit of a wrinkly look that to me looks closer to a flower than smooth cardstock does. After I break down the fibers and I curl the ends of the leaves, I then flip it over and use the ball tool to make a cup. And in the cup is where I'll put the tiny flowers as well as the pearl for the center. It is now final assembly time, and I will use dots to establish where the flowers are all going to go. After I get the whole layout done, I will go back in with either monoglue or more dots and perhaps even some dimensionals to lift up the undersides of the flower petals so that if it's going to go through the mail, it doesn't get completely squashed. Another trick to making the flowers look more real is to make sure that they butt up against each other and their leaves actually somewhat intertwine, because that's how real flowers would be. They don't all get separated into nice separate spaces of their own. So you need to make sure that they're overlapping and it's set up in a realistic way if your goal is to make them look as real as possible. And here is the finished card. One last little trick that I did when I set the oval, which is done with dimensionals. I did not, in the middle of it, underneath Sending Wishes Your Way, put any dimensionals, because the last thing I need to consider is whether or not I want to add ribbon. And if I do, I will color match the ribbon, probably the blue, with an equivalent Copic color. Thank you for joining me today as I broke out the flower forming tools, which isn't something I do very often these days. If you enjoyed this project, please like this video, and if you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.